Awesome. So you'll see here the first section that you have is understanding aromatherapy. Now, aromatherapy can be a very confusing term. Okay, the term itself was coined in 1910 by a French chemist named René Gatosafé. Okay, and I'm sorry I didn't put the little um, italics or apostrophes above the E's in the ends of his name, so I apologize. That's a grammatical error on my end. Um, so Rene was a French chemist who worked in his family perfumery, and there was an explosion and a fire while he was working, and he ended up burning his arm. Okay, while it was healing, it had turned gangrene. Okay, and he decided, out of pain, I can imagine, right? This is 1910. They did not have the antibiotics, they did not have the pain medicine, they didn't have the knowledge of medicine as we did. He just decided one day that he was going to dip his arm in a vat of lavender essential oil that his family was using to make perfumes. Now, you can imagine that it would take a lot of desperation to do that, and I would not recommend anybody to do that. Obviously, we have a lot of different things in our modern medicine chest, so to speak, right now. But that's what he had to do at the time. And after dipping and washing his arm with that lavender essential oil, what he said was that it stopped the gasification of the tissue. Okay, so the edges, the borders of his burn had turned gangrene, which means it was necrotic, it was dying, it was no longer living tissue, there was no longer blood supply. Okay, and after this bath, this essential oil bath that he put his whole arm in, the gasification stopped. Okay, and then from there, what ended up happening is that the hand began to heal rapidly, and there was zero scarring. Okay, that's amazing. So he, being a perfumist, coined the term aromatherapy. Okay, now the interesting thing is that prior to this, much prior to this, aromatherapy was being used, at least essential oils we know were being used as early as 3,000 years BC. Okay, there have been archaeological remains found, and actually whole, complete, intact still was found. A whole intact still was found in the Indus Valley in Pakistan, okay, dating from the 3000 BC. Now, some people try to debunk this and say that the still was used for alcohol purposes, but they have found around it perfume bottles, so bottles that contain essential oils and perfume products. Now, what we don't know necessarily is if these distilled aromatics were used for therapeutic purposes or perfume purposes or both. Okay, we can just make an educated assumption that more than likely it was used for both. So medicinal purposes for those who were normal everyday citizens, and then perfumery purposes for those who were more wealthy and could spend more money to be able to lavish themselves in these scents. Now, why can we say that? We can say that because we know that plants have been used for ages, almost since the beginning of time, for medicinal purposes. And we'll get into that a little bit further. But as far as modern aromatherapy, it really started again with Rene Gattuso, because he found and clearly showed the medicinal properties of aromatics with his experience with his hand and his arm. Okay, now it's really funny because in America, right, and in England, we're removed from this story because it's not part of our history. It's not part of French history, is considered world history to us, right? Not national history. So he's not a well-known person in most circles. And so when we think here in America and in England about aromatherapy, we think scent therapy, right? Because it's all about aromas. However, as we can see with Rene, that it wasn't about scent. He was not healed because he smelled the lavender essential oil. He was healed because he had a very strong, potent topical application of the essential oil. Okay, now I will never, and there will never be an aromatherapist that I know of who would ever say, go take a lavender bath if you have experienced a burn. Because we know that it doesn't take that much essential oil, it does not take that much aromatherapy to affect positive change in our clients for health and wellness concerns and complaints. So what Rene did was definitely overkill, but it definitely proved the therapeutic effects and benefits of these wonderful aromatics. Okay, so aromatherapy involves the use of aromatics, and they can be used topically with applying it directly to the site that we want to use it on our bodies. It can be used internally through ingesting it, eating it, cooking with it, drinking fluids that have been that they've been diluted in. They can be used in the forms of pessaries or suppositories as well. And obviously we're smelling them, so we can smell them in several different ways, and we'll get into that a little bit later in this lesson. And aromatics themselves are mostly essential oils, which is what most of my clients use. Hydrosols, which is a water version of the water component of the distillation process. And then also there are a few that are solvent extracted, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well when we talk about how they're obtained. So if you have any questions, or if you've been told anything interesting about the beginnings of aromatherapy, what aromatherapy can and cannot do, we'd love to hear from you. And if there are ways that you've used or have been asked to use your aromatics that seem kind of funny, or that you'd like to double check with us, definitely let us know. And then other than that, we'll see you for the next slide.